Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Charles. This week I'm bringing you 3 stories from Germany, and today's story is also a very empowering tale, same as Monday's, but this is a very famous tale. It's been adapted to so many different forms that, well, quite frankly, I was surprised. And yet, it really is a wonderful story. This is Lorelei. Above Koblenz, where the Rhine flows through the hills covered with vineyards, there is a steep rock, round which many a legend has been woven, the Lorelei Rock. The boatman gazes up at its gigantic summit with awful reverence when the boat glides over the waters at twilight. Like chattering children, the restless waves whisper around the rock, telling wonderful tales of its doings. Above, on its grey head, the legend relates that a beautiful but false nymph, clothed in white and a wreath of stars in her flowing hair, used to sit and sing sweet songs until a sad tragedy drove her forever away. Long, long ago, when night in her dark garment descended from the hills, and her silent comrade the pale moon cast a silver bridge over the deep green stream, the soft voice of a woman was heard from the rock, and a creature of divine beauty was seen on its summit. Her golden locks flowed like a queenly mantle from her graceful shoulders, covering her snow-white raiment so that her tenderly formed body appeared like a cloud of light. Woe to the boatsmen who passed the rock at the close of day! As of old, men were fascinated by the heavenly song of the Grecian hero, so was the unhappy voyager allured by this being to sweet forgetfulness. His eyes, even as his soul, would be dazzled, and he could no longer steer clear of reefs and cliffs, and this beautiful siren slowly drew him to an early grave. Forgetting all else, he would steer towards her, already dreaming of having reached her, but the jealous waves would wash round his boat and at last dash him treacherously against the rocks. The roaring waters of the Rhine would drown the cries of agony of the victim who would never be seen again. But the Virgin, to whom no one had ever approached, continued every night to sing soft and low, till darkness vanished in the first rays of light, and the great star of day drove the grey mists from the valley. Ronald was a proud youth, and the boldest warrior at the court of his father, the Palatinate Count. He heard of this divine enchanting creature, and his heart burned with the desire to behold her. Before having seen the water nymph, he felt drawn to her by an irresistible power. Under pretense of hunting, he left the court and succeeded in getting an old sailor to row him to the rock. Twilight was brooding over the valley of the Rhine when the boat approached the gigantic cliff. The departing sun had long sunk below the mountains, and now night was creeping on in silence. The evening star was twinkling in the deep blue firmament. Was it his protecting angel who had placed it there as a warning to the deluded young man? He gazed at it in rapture for some time, until a low cry from the old man at his side interrupted him. "The Lorelei," whispered he, startled. "Do you see her, the enchantress?" The only answer was a soft murmur which escaped from the youth. With wide open eyes he looked up, and lo, there she was. Yes, this was she, this wonderful creature. A glorious picture in a dark frame. Yes, that was her golden hair, and those were her flowing white garments. She was hovering up above on the rocks, combing her beautiful hair. Rays of light surrounded her graceful head, revealing her charms in spite of the night and the distance. And as he gazed, her lips opened, and a song thrilled through the silence, soft and plaintive, like the sweet notes of a nightingale on a still summer evening. From her height she looked down into the hazy distance and cast the youth a rapturous look which sank down into his soul, thrilling his whole frame. His eyes were fixed on the features of this celestial being, where he read the sweet story of love. Rocks, stream, glorious night, all melted into a mist before his eyes. He saw nothing but the figure above, nothing but her radiant eyes. The boat crept along too slowly for him. He could no longer remain in it, and if his ear did not deceive him, this creature seemed to whisper his name with unutterable sweetness, and calling to her, he dashed into the water. A death-like cry echoed from the rocks, and the waves sighed and washed over the unhappy youth's corpse. The old boatman moaned and crossed himself, and as he did so lightning tore the clouds asunder, and a loud peal of thunder was heard over the mountains. Then the waves whispered gently below, and again from the heights above, sad and dying away, sounded the Lorelei's song. The sad news was soon brought to the Palatinate Count, who was overpowered with grief and anger. He ordered the false enchantress to be delivered to him, dead or alive. The next day, a boat sailed down the Rhine manned by 4 hardy, bold warriors. The leader looked up sternly at the great rocks which seemed to be smiling silently down at him. He had asked permission to dash the diabolical seducer from the top of the rocks into the foaming whirlpool below, where she would find a certain death, and the Count had readily agreed to this plan of revenge. The first shades of twilight were gliding softly over mountain and hill. The rock was surrounded by armed men, and the leader, followed by some daring comrades, was climbing up the side of the mountain, the top of which was veiled in golden mist, which the men thought were the last rays of sunset. It was a bright gleam of light enshrouding the nymph who appeared on the rocks, dreamily combing her golden hair. She then took a string of pearls from her bosom, and with her slender white hand bounded them round her forehead. She cast a mocking glance at the threatening men approaching her. "What are the weak sons of the earth seeking up here on the heights?" said she, moving her rosy lips scornfully. "You sorceress!" cried the leader, enraged, adding with a contemptuous smile, "You! We shall dash you down into the river below." An echoing laugh was heard over the mountain. "Oh, the Rhine will come himself to fetch me," cried the maiden. Then, bending her slender body over the precipice yawning below, she tore the jewels from her forehead, hurling them triumphantly into the waters, while in a low, sweet voice she sang, haste thee, O father dear! Send forth thy steeds from the waters clear. I will ride with the waves and the wind." Then a storm burst forth. The Rhine rose, covering its banks with foam. 2 gigantic billows like snow-white steeds rose out of the depths and carried the nymph down into the rushing current. The terrified messengers returned to the Count, bringing him the tidings of this wonderful event. Ronald, whose body a chance wave had washed up on the banks of the river, was deeply mourned throughout the country. From this time forth the Lorelei was never seen again. Only when night sheds her dark shadow on the hills and the pale moon weaves a silver bridge over the deep green stream, then the voice of a woman, soft and low, is heard echoing from the weird heights on the rocks. The Lorelei has vanished, but her charm still remains. Thou canst find it, O wanderer, in the eyes of the maidens near the Rhine. It blooms on their cheeks, it lingers on their rosy lips. There thou wilt find its traces. Arm thy heart, steel thy will, blindfold thine eye. As a poet of the Rhine once wisely and warningly said, my son, beware of the Rhine. The Lorelei has vanished, but her charm still remains. And that is the German folktale of the Lorelei. Again, this has been adapted and told into so many different forms. It's been in operas, in film, even in musicals. George Gershwin has included the story of the Lorelei, and you know what? I'm going to link in the description on folktaleproject.com for this to one of my favorites, which is Ella Fitzgerald singing George Gershwin's Lorelei. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.